They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Dead Air, a horror podcast.
Brought to you by Big Baby Studios.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dead Air, a horror podcast. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, welcome. You can follow us on our social media pages. We have a Facebook page that you can follow, Dead Air, a horror podcast. We also have a nice little community group on Facebook. So you can search under groups, Dead Air, a horror podcast. And over there, we have people talking about their favorite horror movies coming up, favorite horror series, books, anything horror related. And you can see that the engagement is pretty good over there. So if you like anything horror related, make sure to check out that group as well. And if you have any concerns or any questions that you'd like to ask us, you can message us on our Instagram at Dead Air Pod. That's where we put our new releases. And of course, Chris is the one managing that. So if you want to bug Chris, you can just message Dead Air Pod on Instagram and he will most likely reply. Today, we have a very special guest. But before that, we'd like to introduce ourselves as hosts. So you've been hearing my voice this whole time. My name is Aaron, and I am a horror fan, meaning I watch horror movies because it gives me that thrill, kind of like when you ride a roller coaster and you're scared, but then afterwards you're really happy. That's the kind of horror that I like. But there's somebody here with a deep relationship with horror, loves horror to the very core, is horror. May I see? Who is
okay,
this?
so Aaron is obviously talking about me. We started off with this podcast and I started to call myself a horror obsessive. A big fan of horror, constantly making best of the year lists, every night choosing between watching my favorite horror movies or a new horror movie, stuff like that. So yeah, very big fan, absolutely obsessed with the genre. Our third host, however, is the exact opposite of myself.
Horror averse. Just kidding. I am Miguel. I love watching movies. And until the pandemic, I kind of avoided horror films. But Chris and Aaron turned me around on that. And this podcast helped me through.
Yeah, this was our pandemic baby podcast. So we're very happy to have our next guest because, guys, I don't know if you've noticed, but we've been going international with our guests lately. Yeah, and this guest is no different because he has actually won an award. First of all, his movie was also a pandemic baby. And because of that, he won several awards. So one of it was the Citizen Kane Award for Best Directorial Revelation. And the other one is the New Direction competition at Cleveland International Film Festival. So his movie is called My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. Everyone, let's welcome our Colombian American filmmaker, Jonathan Cuartas. Hello.
Nice.
Hey,
Jonathan.
Thank you.
Happy
Thanks
to
for
be
coming
here.
on.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's been a long time coming. I was talking to Chris on Instagram for months, just trying to coordinate. So it's great to finally meet you all.
Well, what's great about it is even though it took such a long time. Number one, thank you so much for accepting the invite. But that probably means that we're going to see new material from Jonathan, and that's super exciting. I know that he's been super busy working on a number of new projects. So yeah, excellent.
That's awesome. So Jonathan, the first question that we always ask our guests is, how did you get into horror? What is your horror origin?
It's funny because I always connect my origin just to film in general, or even just writing. I remember as a kid, I would make these little comic books at home and in school or after school. And it was always coming from a place of wanting to create worlds and stories and characters. So I attribute it more to that. And I remember just going to the movies all the time with my two brothers and my parents, and we would just go watch anything, no matter the genre. And actually, speaking of Miguel being horror averse, I actually was really scared of horror as a kid. Like I was always a coward when it came to that. I don't know what it was. Like I just couldn't stand it. And I remember there was this trend of like, this might have been like 2005 or something, when there was these pop-up videos that were like circulating on the web. This was like early internet when we were seeing like those pop-ups, and it just scared me so badly that I just couldn't be around anything like that. And I think now that sort of became the intrigue for me, wanting to explore that genre. And now I'm obsessed. Like I've dug through all the classics, a lot of foreign stuff, a lot of cult stuff. But I really didn't watch any of these movies until I was like late teenager. Like I didn't see Halloween or Texas Chainsaw till I was like in my 20s. It was like really late. But yeah, it started from a place of fear, and then that became intrigue. And now I'm like you, Chris. I'm obsessed with it.
That's awesome. Is there any,
favorites?
Quick follow-up to that. Any favorite genre in the genre, like slasher, supernatural?
Yeah, it's kind of like all over the place, because I love supernatural stuff. I love possession films, but I also love I love a good slasher, like something with a killer, especially like giallo films. Or I also love J horror. International horror, just in general, like Mexican horror is really good. So it really just runs the gamut. Because I also love the more art house horror that's like sort of a hybrid between horror and drama. It's just all over. Yeah.
Mexican horror. Sorry, that's the first. I've never seen a Mexican horror movie.
Yeah.
What makes
Chris,
it different? You've never
pushed Mexican
recommended
enough.
What is that?
Well, John will obviously know more about it. I mean, we're probably more, if ever, we would know about it through Guillermo del Toro. But obviously, going deeper into that, John would have a number of recommendations. I think anything you could.
Yeah, there's. So there's this one movie called We Are What We Are, and it's actually the remake is the one that's more known. But there's actually the originals from Mexico. It's called Somos Lo Que Hay. And it's really good, really gritty cannibal film, but it's also centered on three siblings with a mother and this like obligation to pretty much like eat humans. But it's really good, and it just has this texture that I don't see in a lot of American films or even from other countries. But there's also one called A Monster with 1,000 Heads, which is more of a thriller, but it's really tight and suspenseful. It's like only like 70 minutes long, but really good stuff. There's also another one that just came out recently called Huesera. I think it's like Huesera, the Bone Woman or something.
Bone Woman? Yeah.
Yes, and Michelle is her name. She's in Mexico, and she made this horror film, and it's really good. Body horror movie talking about pregnancy and motherhood, and it's just very exciting to see that.
That's awesome. Because what would you say is the difference between Mexican horror movies and American horror movies? Because there's a huge distinction with J horror, for example. Like there are characteristics like it's just really quiet. There's no music. You're on your toes because of it. What would you say is the Mexican equivalent of that?
I don't know if I don't know it that well to be able to point it out, but I just think culturally, just seeing films in Spanish really excites me. I come from a Colombian family, so seeing any sort of Latino horror movie just gets me excited. And again, just the texture of it. There's something about them leaning into violence a little bit more intensely and like no holds barred that I appreciate too. But yeah, that's what I would say. It's really like the texture and the culture.
Understood. Violence, cannibalism, Chris's favorites.
Yeah. I have seen We Are What We Are. I really enjoyed it. That was definitely the remake, though. I have to thank you for the recommendation. Definitely gonna watch the original. Jumping to that, was this an influence on your short film Kuru, which was the basis for My Heart Can't Beat, since it's like cannibalism?
Yeah, I think I saw it after I made the short. So I saw this like in between the short and the feature. But I found it interesting that it was three siblings and it was cannibalism because the short is based on what we call like a biological cannibalism. It wasn't a psychological one like Hannibal Lecter. It was more of a necessity to eat meat. But we got a really good producer note for the feature that said, why don't you just use the archetype of the vampire? Everyone knows that they need blood to survive. So we don't have to explain, oh, this is a different kind of cannibal, because I wasn't interested in wasting time explaining this thing. So we all know vampires, no sunlight, they need blood.
It didn't want to make new lore, right? It's like, let's just use this. More relatable.
Exactly. Like, let me take the time to live with this family and get to know their dynamics. Similar to We Are What We Are, they didn't waste any time like explaining how they got there. They just threw us right in, and we were more interested in seeing how they operate within this crazy family dynamic.
Well, now that we've already opened the floodgates and started talking about My Heart Can't Beat, maybe we can start, formally.
Sure.
So, John, is there any way you could give us a quick synopsis into My Heart Can't Beat? Let you tell it too for people who haven't heard about, who haven't seen it.
Yes, it is a touching family drama. No, it's a film about familial obligation and codependency, and I think it's three siblings, and the youngest one is sick. We described it as a sickness where he needs to ingest human blood to survive, fresh human blood. And so his older brother and sister are tasked with finding this in the name of keeping the family going, in the name of love for your sibling. And we get different views within this family. The older sister is very committed to this family dynamic, and she'll do anything for her brothers, to the point where she's kind of desensitized to the violence. And then on the other hand, the older brother's very tormented and very haunted by this task, and he doesn't know what to do at this point. And so we sort of start the movie with him at his breaking point, deciding whether or not he wants to continue.
Fantastic. So usually whenever we talk about specific films, we ask Miguel over here to give us a synopsis, just to prove that
he watched it.
That he actually
and this
watched
started because there were maybe 2 or 3 movies that he did not.
That I tried to get, and then said no, and tried to get by with a Wikipedia plot synopsis. That was just for The Conjuring, by the way.
Yeah. So having heard that synopsis, Miguel, if you had not seen the film, Miguel has seen the film. If you had not seen the film, would that be something that you would want to watch?
Totally. Because I like
averse person.
Yeah, like I'm happy when it's always framed as a family drama. Like that's always an easy way in. Oh, I can do drama, and then it's like a sibling story, which is something I always love. And then if you tell me like 2 of the siblings, one of them is sort of half-hearted into it, and one of them is sort of like the person who feels more obligated, I do love that tension, and I do love that dynamic. So yeah, that's a way to sell it to me. Especially, I think Chris, you even mentioned now this isn't a jump scare. Like even before when you told us to watch it for this part, you don't have to worry, Miguel. It's not a jump scare thing. It's more of like a family drama. Like I'm in, and I did super enjoy it, Jonathan. Yeah, it was really great.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and I think also the reason Miguel enjoys stuff like this is because this isn't a film that kind of leaves you with graphic images that you're going to dream about. And, you think they're going to come for you. It's a third-person story. I'm not going to be possessed here. No ghost is coming to my house, right? This is a story.
Yeah. And then, what was I going to say about, sorry, we can continue. I'm just going to form my idea about how I approached it and how I appreciated it later on.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to hear it. And I'm not, just to be clear, I love the fact that it's a horror movie and that it's a drama movie. Like, I wasn't trying to say oh, this isn't a horror. Some people have told me this is so much more than a horror. And I'm like, wait, but by you saying that, you're saying that horror is not worthy of being a prestigious genre. And I'm not afraid of it's not jump scare heavy. It's not super graphic, but there is a lot of blood. There is like there's still the mythology of the vampire. There's still like tension. And so I wasn't trying to shy away from those tropes. You know, some of those tropes exist because they've worked for so many years.
Yeah.
Agree. And also there's sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just gonna say it doesn't shy away from imagery that can chill you. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure there's dialogue and there's like, you know, and we're exploring their internal beings, but there's still that image that kind of stays with you because in a way it's disturbing or it's scary or it's like, you know, and at the same time poignant. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Some of my favorite horror is the disturbing genre.
Yeah.
That's the one that I am not a fan of.
But I think like disturbing in a psychological way more than just like a torture. You know, something
not like Human Centipede, nothing like that.
No. I haven't seen any of those, but I mean more like Cure, the Kiroshi Kurosawa or Audition, you know, which that one's really heavy, graphic, but it's also there's a psychological component there that's not that I imagine wouldn't be in Human Centipede. I haven't seen those movies, but I feel like Audition has so much more. It like starts like a comedy movie. Yeah.
Audition freaked me out the whole time. I was just freaking out.
So,
but I wanted to jump off from something you said about people saying more than a horror movie because horror movie isn't a justified genre. It's really interesting because the three of us have discussed that about why is it horror movies are not considered for like the Academy Awards, you know, things like that. Even if they are so well crafted, that genre doesn't seem to penetrate, you know, high awards like that. Why do you think that is?
I think because horror uses all these legends and archetypes and mythologies to talk about things that perhaps drama films just talk about it in a more surface level way, but we're using these monsters to talk about these things. And so maybe the fact that it's like through the lens or through the veil of killing or scares or blood or pushing the envelope as far as like what is graphic and like even transcending violence and everything, maybe it doesn't get taken as seriously. And I think a lot of people have a preconceived notion of what horror is, where when it starts to feel, I guess you could say, more intellectual, because I would argue that even Texas Chainsaw is like very intellectual film and it's talking about a lot of important things subtextually. But even when they say like elevated horror, that's when people start saying like, oh no, that's a psychological thriller. And that's a term that I'm like, that's not what that is. Like why are we ashamed of just saying it's a horror movie? You know, there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. Perfect example. One of the reasons we actually started this dialogue a few years ago was Hereditary. Toni Collette, I think for that year, she easily had the best performance of any lead actor for that year. For me, she wasn't even nominated. You know,
she was so good there.
She was incredible. And then, I mean, that movie is really, it's just her, the way she did, she showed grief in that film. I don't think has ever been surpassed, honestly. But largely ignored because it's horror. And sad to say.
And I would argue it's even just genre in general. Like, another great film a couple of years back was Good Time with Robert Pattinson and the Safdie brother movie. And it's very like pulp. It feels like almost like a 70s New York crime drama. And it was just completely panned because I guess, the same thing. It's like, oh, it's not hitting these notes and these flavors that the Academy wants to see.
Got it. Yeah. So there is still that prejudice against genre in general. Like, you know, like they want movies to be the certain form and look and the things. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of interesting stuff going on outside all of that. So,
but it's fine.
Anyway,
it's fine too, right? Because there is the fun, there's the excitement of the genre of horror being the outcast genre, where we're like, okay, we don't want to play in the same circles. Like, we have our own space,
right?
Where, you know, there's an appeal to being on the outside of it all and exploring these dark things, and like having this cult. Like, some of the best horror movies I come across were very disliked when they came out, and like a lot of them are cult classics, and now they're highly revered, but for years they were pushed aside and said, this is just garbage, you know?
Like what? Can you give us some examples?
Now that I can't think of any off the top of my head after saying that.
I mean, Texas Chainsaw. I mean, when it came out, The Thing was a very lowly rated when it came out, a big flop. Now it's like, you know, on most people's top 10 list.
It's like it's some that I don't like, some that I didn't even know were disliked or not appreciated. Like, I'm sure there's even like legendary films that we love now that maybe when they came out they just weren't appreciated. I'll give you a list later.
Yeah. Well, now that we're talking about bards, My Heart Can't Beat won a number of awards. Among those that won, what was the most meaningful for you?
The most meaningful one was the one at Sitges with the Citizen Kane one, just because of the people who have gotten it before me, which are some of my heroes, like Yorgos Lanthimos got it for Dogtooth, Anna Lily Armapour got it for A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, and Julia, I might be butchering her last name, Julia Ducournau got it for Raw, which is another cannibal film, which is one of my favorite horror films. And so I was, and now the director of Huesera got it after me. So I'm just like, fantastic. I'm in great company. I don't even feel like I'm worthy, but I'm like, hey, I'm here. I'm just gonna enjoy it.
Man, all those films you just mentioned, I was like, damn, those are all masterpieces.
Yeah.
What do you call this? And most recently, My Heart Can't Beat was featured on the AV Club as one of the top 25 vampire films of all time. All time. Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's really cool. I mean, it should be much higher on the list, but yeah, that must be really, really cool.
I feel like it's surreal when you see those things, because you don't think of, when you make a film, you don't think it's going to compete with like the real vampire movies. Like, I never saw it that way. You know, you always feel like it's not the same, or it's not good enough. And there are films there that are not on that list that are some of my favorites, like Martin or Habit. And I'm just like, yeah, maybe this list is rigged or something. It's like the imposter syndrome, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'd love to talk more about My Heart Can't Beat. Like, you mentioned, well, it wasn't an influence, but it was an accidental influence later on. We Are What We Are. Sorry, this is my son. What else influenced the screenplay, aside from your own short, of course?
I remember when so Kuru, the short, was my film school thesis project. And I pitched it. And I remember when I pitched it, I said, this is Let the Right One In meets Dogtooth. And all the professors were like, we don't know what those movies are. Because I think I mean, they might have heard of them, but I just don't think, you know, it was a community college. It's a local college in Miami. And I feel like maybe they weren't, I don't know. Every time I pitched a movie, they're like, what is this? You're not going to make that. and so I was always, my professors thought that I was a cinematographer because I would just shoot the movies since I didn't get my films chosen. And so when I pitched Kuru as that was like my final film, I got selected. And my professor, to this day, he's like, I didn't understand what you were trying to make, but I knew that you understood it. And I'm like, okay, resonates.
Okay.
And so, those are two of my big influences when I was making the short. And I think that carried over to the feature. And then there were a lot of like visual influences as well that influenced both me and my brother, who's Michael is my older brother, and he was the DP on this film. But he's much more, he feels like another director. He feels like a producer, even almost a screenwriter. Like we're just like attached at the hip creatively.
That's amazing. And it must be so much fun working with someone that you're very close to.
Yeah. If it works, if it works. if not, it could
go either way.
Yeah. But it really felt like a family circus because we had my brother and then his girlfriend Ivana was the second assistant camera and she took a bunch of film photography. My dad was actually the production designer on it too. So great. It was like a bunch of friends and
That's
family.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So I guess that family vibe really rubbed off on the performances, right? Because honestly, one of my initial things was they really felt like the three leads really felt like a dysfunctional family. Like you could really believe that they were all related to each other. Was there a lot of work involved in that, or was it organic?
We didn't have time or money for that. It was. I'll tell you this, to be honest, there were no rehearsals, zero. There was only one table read the night before, and then like a 10-minute talk, like on the way to the car, telling them like, oh, maybe you can do this a little bit more, a little bit less, and that was it. And then we just like went straight into it. Aside from a few calls, and then we just hit the ground running. Like there was just no time, and it's funny how it worked out because Owen and Ingrid, who play the younger brother Thomas and the sister Jessie, they ended up sharing an Airbnb in Utah. And Patrick, who plays the brother, who's sort of like the black sheep or the one who's not so committed, he had a different Airbnb. So something about I remember Owen and Ingrid, they told me, and I never asked them to do this, but they said that they were living together in this space, and they were always like rehearsing their lines and like going through the scenes and workshopping everything and making sure that they had everything down emotionally. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's why you're so incredible, because you made it all happen like behind the scenes, and I wasn't even there.
Like the real bonding happened, and the outcast brother.
yeah.
And they're felt like a true outcast.
They're super close to this day. Owen and Ingrid are like really good friends, and I mean, we're all still cool. Like Patrick is amazing, and he's so funny and so smart and talented. But yeah, we've all been able to be friends. But Ingrid and Owen are like, they're still tight.
Oh, I love those stories. Like,
love it.
How did you choose Owen, Ingrid, and Patrick?
Yeah, how did you find them three? Yeah.
So our producer, God bless him, Kenny Oiwa Riches, he's a Japanese American producer, director, writer, and my brother and I, more my brother, he was always like persistent in trying to get coffee with Kenny, because Kenny had a feature that had played at Sundance, and at that point, my brother Mike and I were just like new short filmmakers. So we were like trying to rub shoulders with anyone we could. And my brother was always like, hey man, can we get coffee? Hey man, let's hang out. And I really credit Mike with finding the financing, because he was the one who nurtured this relationship. And we ended up working on Kenny's third feature as a director. And Patrick was on that. And it turns out that Patrick Fugit is childhood friends with Kenny. They grew up together in Salt Lake City, Utah. And Kenny just happens to live like part-time in Miami and part-time in Utah. So then I had Kuru, and I had a mediocre feature version screenplay. And then Kenny told me one day when we were shooting pickups for his film, he said, we read your script and I really like it. We want to help you make it. And then I was like, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean we're getting money? And he's like, we'll find the money. And then his partner is an investor, Matt Wiggum, and he has really good taste, and he's like very invested in the arts, and he was able to put in the budget. And so naturally we're like, what about Patrick Fugit? Maybe he could play the brother. And Kenny sent him the script, and Kenny didn't tell him what it was. He's just like, here's the script by the two brothers that you met, and we had already become friends. And so he reads the script. He didn't know it was horror. He didn't know anything. So he starts reading, and it's like, oh, this guy's nice. He's picking up a homeless guy. He's going to give him some food. And then he hits him in the head with the baseball bat. And then he slits his throat and drains all his blood. And Patrick was just riveted by that crazy twist and like the way the film kept. He called it like it was mutating. Like he said, it felt like a horror and then a drama and then a horror. And he was like dizzy with excitement. And he's just very into dark humor. So he was just laughing the entire time. And he was down. He was down to do it. And from there, once we had Patrick Fugit on board, he has the clout to attach these other actors. And Owen Campbell was someone that I saw in this movie called Super Dark Times, that if you haven't seen it, you should watch it.
It's so good.
And I'll tell you, Chris, I saw him in that, and I'm like, this is Thomas. Like that, the sensitive eyes, the sort of pleading in his look. You just want to hug him. And I was so happy when we got on a Zoom call. And one of the producers was like, all right, you got to play it cool. Okay. Don't just go in there like, oh, I love your work. You have to be like, yeah, it'd be cool to work with you. And so I get on the call and I'm like, look, man, I'm just going to be honest. I love your work. I really want to work with you. And he really, he resonated with that honesty. And now I'm like really close with him. Somehow he had heard about the movie on we had a website with like the pitch deck, and he had seen it somehow. So it all came together. And then, sorry, this is a long answer, but Ingrid,
no, we're into it.
Ingrid is like such a blessing that she came on board, because we had another actress attached to play Jessie, and we were excited, and she had to drop out 2 weeks before shooting because of scheduling. And I was just like, what are we gonna do? I was shopping. We were like going to Walmart at midnight trying to find clothes. And I'm like on Zoom calls with different actresses trying to find someone. And Ingrid, she hadn't been in a feature, at least like not in a lead role, but I saw this short film and I was just in love with her style of stoic. Like the way she did stoicism was because it wasn't like a heavy handed, like she's trying to be serious. There was something genuine about it. And when she said yes, I remember she's like, okay, I'll let you know tomorrow morning. And so I didn't sleep. And then in the morning, I didn't hear from her. And I'm like, she's not going to do it. So then I text her around noon, and she's like, oh, she just asked me a few questions like, so what are you shooting on? Oh, so do I fly this day or this day? Where do I stay? And then she's like, okay, I'll do it. And I was like, oh, thank God. So it was just like spur of the moment, last second, we attached her.
That's an awesome origin story.
Being all of us are kind of in various forms of production. We all dabbled. Aaron is an actress, by the way, in the Philippines. We all dabbled behind the camera. I honestly, stories like this, like filmmaker success, there's nothing better than that in the world. Yeah. Like, it's just so good, because we know the struggle. Wow, it's wonderful. It's just wonderful to hear that everything came together.
It's always one thing that can break it all. Like one tiny element, if that falls apart, everything falls like a house of cards. And somehow there's like the magic that everything comes together last second. You find the location you're missing. You find the actor, and then you're just so grateful when you're on set.
Yeah, and I think it's part of out for the best, right? If something goes wrong, you're just like, oh no, but this is better.
Yes, it kind of brings out that energy of just like some like a frenzied thing we're in, and it kind of sort of squeezes out the creative juices, and then it all works out really well.
Yeah.
And then
it has you,
then you end up,
keeps you on your toes. And
then you end up living a life chasing that feeling.
Yeah, it's like it's like happy accidents. Like you're saying, you chase that feeling, but when you're there, you're always like, oh no, we didn't get the house with 2 stories. Because I wrote the film after Kuru, and Kuru had 2 floors, and it's such a small thing. But I had to rewrite the script based on the geography of the house that we found, and now I would never change that house. That's my favorite house that I've shot in. But you're so like set in your ways that you're stubborn at first.
Yeah. Aside from that, the challenges of getting it made, was there any particular scene that you had trouble with executing, or was it be it logistics or yeah?
Oh yeah, there was one day where I almost I'm like I can't do this. Like it's too much. Like I was about to break down because it's this forest sequence where Dwight is chasing Eduardo, the Mexican immigrant, and it's supposed to be like a bigger set piece. It's physical. They're throwing each other, and it's in a forest. And we had a location with a permit, and it fell apart, and we couldn't shoot there on the day of. And so we only had 3 hours to do this scene, right? 3 hours, and we still didn't have a location. So we started driving up the canyon. Okay, where are we going to go? We drive up to this place that our producer suggests, and there is the storm of the century. It's like pouring, pouring, pouring. And so we say, okay, we have to go back down to this ranch where, if you watch the film, it's not really a forest. It's like a bush. and so we get there, and I'm already like disheartened. And my brother is the one who's like, my brother, Patrick, and the AD were the things that kept me going, because I was like, you know what? Maybe we'll just cut it out. We don't see what happens. My brother's like, let's just do it. We're already here. We don't have to do we had a Steadicam planned. We didn't have time for it. And then Patrick was like, what if we do a little pan? Like we've done these slow pans. So he was even like helping me on how to shoot it. And then the AD, we ran out of time. Like we were out of hours. And I'm like, do we have time to the AD? And he's like, if the sun is still out, then you have time. And I was so thankful. And we ended up shooting that sequence in 20 minutes.
Wow.
And,
wow.
And now I'm so happy that it happened that way. Because if you see the movie, it's very still. There's not a lot of movement as far as the camera. And I feel like it would have been a mistake to use a Steadicam out of nowhere, because we had already established a visual language. And so I'm happy that it was still shot, even though it was like this hectic, I guess you could say, action scene. We still shot it with these tight static shots, which is what we intended in the first place. And so that was our rule moving forward, was my brother and I were like, if it's going to look cheap, then we don't shoot it. And we find a way to do it where we're hiding the fact that we have a tiny budget.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
It worked out really well. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that shot is actually in the trailer. The running through the I love that sequence so much. It's one of the first things that really sold me onto the as a viewer. You're like, oh, this is different. Like it just felt so artistic, almost like you're like, this isn't just a horror film. This is something like where you're really gonna just sit down and enjoy like the process, the filmmaking, the artistry. I totally remember that sequence. That's so cool. Just to hear the backstory.
I find it so cool that Patrick was so involved, which just shows that everyone, once you got into it, was just so passionate to get everything.
The first day of shooting, we shot all of Patrick's bedroom scenes, which was very easy, trying to get into it. But then the second half of the first day, we shot the shed scene, which is him and Eduardo talking in the shed. Yeah. And that scene is very heavy performance-wise. It's like it's like it anchors. It's kind of in the middle of the story. It's very important. And I was so nervous. But Patrick, I remember he saw Mike's lighting and the way he set up the lights and the frame. And he's like, you guys, I think he just trusted us from that point forward. And once we had his trust, he was on our side. And from then it was like,
that's so cool.
I'm with you guys. Like, I trust you. And it felt very validating because we were new filmmakers. I still feel like a new filmmaker, but I was intimidated to work with an actor like that. And once he was with us, I'm like, okay, now I'm confident. Now I can try things.
Yeah, like it's safe now because everyone's on the same page.
Exactly.
Can I ask a photography question, Chris and Ian, for Jonathan? Like the visual signature of the film, like you described how it was like pure more of static shots more than dynamic shots, and you even mentioned that putting in a steady cam shot would have ruined the whole feel. Is that a visual signature by you and your brother? Because I noticed that like everything in the house or even outside is like framed really well by other things, like other elements in the house were like a hallway or let's say even the dining room was framed. Was that because of how the house was built or the location, or did you decide beforehand like this is going to be like a quieter film and then
it was
cinematography that way?
It's a great question, and it was good. It was multiple things. So it was one of them was, I think, just a gut instinct. My brother and I were like, well, we feel like we just want to observe and sit and watch these characters without feeling like we need to show off with the camera. Like, oh, this is our first film, so we have to do like all the Martin Scorsese tricks. So we're like, let's just have a patient camera that's watching this family fall apart. And I feel like there's something scarier about seeing these horrific images through a frame that's so still and quiet. Because a lot of the times, when you wake up at night and you're scared in your room, it's very quiet and very still. It's not crazy handheld POV. Yeah. And so that's one of the reasons why my brother was very influenced by Ozu and the camera work, specifically in Good Morning, where the camera's just like sitting on the floor, and even films like Ida and Cold War. And aside from that, we're talking about budget, right? So when we're writing a script and we're trying to be aware of our budget, which I could just say our budget was nearly $200,000, which is very small for a film like this, really for any film. But one of the things that we thought of was it's not just about the characters not being a lot in one location. It's also about how we shoot things, because if we don't need to set up a dolly, if we don't need to rent a steady cam, if we're just on a tripod, we're saving a lot of money. So even from a logistical standpoint, it helps.
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And so you did a lot of pivoting while making the film. I find that really incredible that all of that really contributed to how great it is already. But how different was the final film to your initial your initial idea, everything that was on your first draft?
Okay. Yeah, from like script to edit, it changed a lot actually. So the first draft of the script, I literally just opened up Kuru document and started filling in blanks, and it was terrible. So then we did a big rewrite, and with the help of our producers and my brother and everyone, we did a big rewrite. But even in the edit, it was so much different. It was 30 minutes longer. It was a completely different ending. And there were so many scenes that we cut out. And even people died, and they don't die now. But it's one of those things that you just have to be open and trust your collaborators. When we saw it on the screen in the rough cut, all of us were like, no, that doesn't work. It wasn't executed right. Tonally, it was off. And it was up to not just me, but everyone to figure out how are we going to fix this and make it work. And now, for me, there is no other version. This is the version. This is the ultimate version. And there's no like the version you never saw. No, I'm very happy with the way this turned out, even if it didn't stick to my draft. Like that just shows like the screenplay is not the Bible. It's just the attempt at making a movie.
Can I know what the original ending was?
Yeah, so originally it was sort of the way it ends now, and then so Thomas is still let go by his brother, and then Dwight goes to the beach, but then he decides to come back and just stay at the house. So he's kind of like, okay, I'm sticking around, and someone shows up in the front porch, and it happens to be the dad of the kid that he let go.
Oh,
So the kid, when he's like, "Oh, is that your dad?" That guy in the house used to have a much bigger role, and I felt so bad.
Oh.
I was like, "Hey, we cut out your scene, which is the last scene of the movie." But
okay.
he shows up and he kills Dwight. He like shoots him in the head, and then it just ends. That's how it ends, and it felt like. First of all, the way we shot it just felt like really weird, and the coverage was off, and because we were trying to hide the fact that we had like a BB gun, and for safety precautions, it just didn't look legit. And then also tonally, it was so definitive when really the film is like this melancholic study of this family's obligation. That at the end, it was so much more powerful to end with Dwight on the beach, because it was almost like purgatory. He's like, okay, I'm free now, but I'm alone. And it was much better punishment than him just getting shot.
It's true.
Wow, that's incredible. This is so different endings. I can't imagine the original one because of how powerful the one that I saw is, Wow.
Yeah.
And also,
yeah.
No, and also the courage to just say, like, so you wrote something, you prepared for that ending, and then at the editing process, maybe you feel that this isn't the way it should go, and I think it should end this way. I think that's also a lot of guts.
Yeah, and the producer Kenny, he's the one who he already knew. He's like, this is the order, this is how it will work, and then the editor did it. And it's just like, there's no time for your ego to be like, no, but my script was like this. Like, I knew that it didn't work. So what are you gonna do? You have to push forward. And I felt like there were things that we took out that I was more sad to take out. There was this scene where Thomas looks out of the little hole in his window with the sunglasses, and he takes them off, and his eyes are like bleeding. And that's like, I wanted to see that because it was like a tear of blood.
Yeah.
And there's like this fan-made poster, well, not fan-made, filmmaker-made poster that I created with a still where he's like wearing the glasses and there's a tear. But it's things like that. You just have to kill your darlings, and just for the sake of pacing and making sure it holds together, because it is a slow movie. Like, I'm aware of the fact that it could get long, and it could be like too quiet for some people. And so you don't want to outstay your welcome. You don't want it to be 2 hours. We were happy that it was 90 minutes.
That's awesome. I love it. And actually, I wanted to ask, because I do improv. So was there any room, since you were able to just change things and it organically just came together, were there any improvised moments? Because I hear about that a lot in filmmaking, like, oh, this part was actually improvised and we kept it in the film.
Yeah, it's funny because it wasn't so much like the dialogue was improvised. It was more like, and this is something that I forget, but it was like a whole character thing that Owen had. Owen is so, like, he's so tapped into the character, and he's so sensitive, and he observes everything so much. And he told me one time, where it's like improvisations for the movie to change, like we're adding another scene. And it's so cool how it happens, because he was saying, look, everyone is taking care of me, but who does Thomas take care of? He wants to take care of someone too. So he thought, what if I have these little crickets in my bedroom and I'm feeding them this food? Or he said ants, like there's these little ants that he feeds. And so then I'm like, that's a really good idea, but I feel like ants are going to be hard to photograph being fed because they're so small. So then I went to my dad, who was the production designer, and he's like, what if we do crickets? So then now there's a scene with him just feeding crickets, and maybe it's random to the plot, but thematically that's what drives Thomas to feel like he's important because he's also taking care of something and keeping it alive.
Yeah, that's actually a good thing to add because he's just not this helpless all the time kind of character.
Yeah.
Suddenly he also brings something to the table.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's funny because there's this behind the scenes featurette on YouTube, and Owen mentions that he's the one who's dead technically. He's like
Yes.
the living dead in a way, but he's the pulse of the family. Like he's the thing that he's the person who wants to go out and make these connections and have friends, and he's the one who's like bringing up the energy of this house that feels like a dead house. So it's funny that it's like who's the monster at the end of the day.
It's true. Wow. I didn't even see it that way.
Wow, this really has given me like even more appreciation for something I really really enjoyed from the ground up. Like it's given me a lot of insight into everything. Wow, I really love the a lot of these choices were actually done by your collaborators because it just shows that like it was so organic. You know, like you said earlier, you trust the people you're working with. You trust their decisions, their creative decisions, and they trust you as well. Like that's I mean, you couldn't ask for a better,
No, I'm so lucky, so lucky because I've had friends who've made their first features, and the actors were not so nice, and I'm very thankful to all the people that we worked with. Patrick was like he was such a like important part to everything. He even choreographed the fight scene in the kitchen with Eduardo, like with our stunt coordinator. In my mind, I'm like, yeah, you're going to have him in a chokehold. And that's about as far as I got. And when we showed up on set, Patrick's like, we're going to come here and then reset and then fall into the sink and come back. And then you're going to like, he's into combat, by the way. He's like into combat and martial arts. And so he just had all of this planned out. And my brother and I were like, okay, let's do it.
Absolutely.
So I've got a silly claim to fame. I actually live across from Patrick's mother-in-law. Literally feet away from his, and he comes like every 2 years. Him and his wife and his child they go for Christmas. Yeah, and I'm like always like looking for the courage to just go up and be like, dude, this is so creepy. I am your next door neighbor.
Wow.
I mean, like, huge fan of yours. Like, but I've never
Have you done it? Have you done?
No.
I'm gonna tell him.
Yeah.
Chris, wouldn't the power move be saying that you saw him in this movie and not reference Almost Famous at all? That's how you do it.
No, I would never. I would reference my two favorites, which is this one and Outcast. Also a horror show that he does. Yeah. So I'm always like, damn, he's there. He's like literally feet away. Like,
Would you reference it or would you just go, hey?
Hey, neighbor. Can I borrow
Hey, Patrick.
What? Patrick Fugit? Oh my gosh. What a surprise.
That's so cool. That's so interesting. I'm actually gonna tell him. He would find it funny. He's very cool. He's a very cool guy.
Yeah, maybe next time I'll work up the courage to do it.
It's so good that he's been able to transcend this major almost he got famous with Almost Famous and pretty good. Love that movie. And then he's still working and doing all taking risks with different kinds of roles. Even after that, that's pretty cool actually. Yeah.
It was fun to just hey, you're going to be a little bit chubby with a beard and tighty-whitey underwear. And he's just like, I love it. Let's do it. I'm down. Let's have this sad, unqualified serial killer character. And he just fully went in,
Commit.
Yeah, I like that. I like the description, unqualified serial killer. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I wanted to ask actually, because are you working on anything right now? Is there anything that we can look forward to?
So I did my my twist on a vampire movie, and now I'm doing a twist on a possession film that is it's
Oh, that's Miguel's favorite.
Oh my
it's
God.
it's set in 1980s Miami, and it's about two sisters who are taxi drivers, and they are from Colombia, and there's a lot of Spanish and a lot of my heritage, which I'm very happy to explore because I am a proud Latino, proud son of two Colombian immigrants, and I think it's time to start exploring some of that culture especially in the horror space. So I'm really excited to do that. So right now I'm still writing.
Ooh, do you know when?
That's exciting.
Yeah. Do you have like a timeline on when you want to start filming?
I'm like, if they said, hey, we could start filming next week, I'll do it. But I think it's like I'm beholden to we have producers. We have good producers right now that are helping us develop and just making sure that the script is ready to go. And once we do that, then we'll be able to go and approach studios and financiers to then make it. And fingers crossed, I want to say maybe the end of next year. But I've been saying that, and it's just a long process. And there's always things that get in the way, like COVID and the writer's strike. But, gotta keep pushing forward.
Yeah.
Cannot wait. Absolutely cannot wait for this.
We are so excited for that.
Yeah.
So can you let our listeners know where they can follow you? Do you have social media accounts or for your company too?
Yeah, so it's just me. It's at Jon Cuartas. That's JONCUARTAS on Instagram. I'm also the same on Twitter, I believe. And then Instagram, we also have a page dedicated to the film, which is at Art Can't Beat. And there you can find the link to Shudder or wherever you want to stream it. And then also to plug my brother, who's a cinematographer. His Instagram is at Michael Cuartas DP.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jonathan. We had so much fun talking to you. Thank you for coming on our show.
No, this was really fun. And
It's been quite an honor to have you on. Yeah. It's been a long time coming. I was so totally worth it. I'm so happy we finally got to connect.
Sorry it took so long.
Oh, no, not at all. We're again a massive fan of My Heart Can't Beat, and it's such an honor to have you on. Talk about it.
Thank you so much.
I
enjoyed your movie a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I think it's really nice because you're the people who are keeping this film alive because it's a very small movie, and the fact that it's still like I see Letterboxd review, I see a Twitter post, I see a message request from Dead Air Pod on my Instagram, and these are the things that are helping keep the film going. And I see, even if it's 3 people a day watching it, I still see a consistent amount of views, and that just warms my heart. So I appreciate people like you and fans, the horror obsessives, and the horror averse. All 3 of you.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And to the listeners, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to ask any questions, Jonathan left us his Instagram account, and you can also message our Instagram account at Dead Air Pod. Again, we have a Facebook page, Dead Air, a horror podcast, and then a horror page is our group.
Oh, it's very official.
If you want to discuss more about this movie, you can bring it up again. Let's keep it alive in our group. Join the Dead Air, a horror fan page. So thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you,
Jonathan.
Thank you so much, dude.
My pleasure.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.